From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Speaking of DOGE, the Elon Musk effort at the Department of Government Efficiency, Musk was at the Oval Office this week. Here he is explaining why he views the DOGE mission as so important.
So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense. But and if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really would say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country, and it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
Kim, what's your sense as we sit here 3-4 weeks into the new administration of where this DOGE effort stands? It has made some headway in the federal courts after some of these lawsuits were filed and had some restraining orders, temporary administrative stays that were issued by judges. But a lot of chatter this week about the idea that there is now a DOGE constitutional crisis in Washington.
This is absolutely nonsense. DOGE, by the way, I think that there's probably a little bit of criticism to be had about its initial weeks in whether or not it was transparent enough about everything it's been trying to do. I don't think that was purposeful. I don't think it's trying to be shady. I think it's just an enormous effort. And I would point people to just this week, they got a DOGE website up. They've also been cataloging what they've been doing on X with an account they have there. What they have done that we can see that they have successfully accomplished has been a number of cuts already in things that just make eminent sense. They did get rid of a lot of DEI contracts. They're canceling, for instance, executive coaching contracts. We know about some of the very silly and hard to defend grants that have been shut down coming out of the U.S. International Aid Development Group, USAID. They've also, been canceling leases and consolidating space. In terms of the big ones, that's where they're in court. And the reality is that a huge percentage of the steps that they are taking that stem from some of Donald Trump's initial executive orders are on pretty solid legal ground. That's what a lot of this chaos coverage, what they claim is chaos, is missing, is that there has actually been a lot of thought behind a lot of these. And I would put into that category the freeze or pause on some spending. Look, Congress, for a lot of the spending, did not specify that money had to go out of a door by a certain day. Even the prior administration waited long periods of time before issuing some of the money from some of these laws because it was checking who was getting it and setting up programs. So that's certainly allowable. You had a judge this week that agreed with the Trump administration to allow its buyout offer of federal employees to go forward, said that the union who had sued over that did not have standing. I would mention Schedule F, which is this plan to reclassify certain civil servants, those that have a lot of policymaking authority, in a way that makes it easier to transfer them or fire them if they are not doing their jobs. This was something Trump tried in the first term. Biden essentially dismantled it and even put up a regulation to try to thwart it in the future. Notably, even that Biden regulation never suggested that this was illegal. And in fact, you can look to the statutes and there's solid ground for why they would be able to do something like this. So I would argue that most of what they are doing, you never can tell with the courts. The courts are adjudicating it, but they have a solid case going into court. And a constitutional crisis is when people are operating outside of a court without license. And that's not what's happening here.
To that point, Alicia, I do share some of the concern that both parties are tiptoeing toward the point where one president might decide that he is going to try to flout a court order against a program. A student loan program might be one example on the Democratic side. Some of this strikes me as posturing for the base of both parties. This was the tweet heard around the world this week from J.D. Vance. He wrote, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general on how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. And that was read by many people as a suggestion that the Trump administration is raring to go out and ignore the courts. And to my eye, that's not the only way to read that. I would quibble with Vance somewhat. I mean, maybe judges can't tell the Attorney General how to use discretion as prosecutor, but if the Attorney General is doing targeted selective prosecution based on political party, for example, the courts, I think, would have very little trouble setting some of those cases aside under existing doctrines of selective prosecution, for example. But notable also that President Trump, the principal, was asked on Tuesday about court rulings, and here's what he said: "I always abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it." And so, Alicia, I mean, maybe we will get to a point where there is some ruling against DOGE that the executive branch is going to say it's not going to follow, but we are certainly not there yet, at least to my eye.
Right. They are appealing. There have been some 60 or more than 60 lawsuits filed in various district courts around the country. They're mostly concentrated, by the way, in the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and that's because that is now the most liberal circuit. All the judges who sit on the appeals court are Democratic appointees. And so the reason why Democrats are primarily suing there is because they're betting that they're going to win, and then the Supreme Court won't take up a lot of these cases. To your point about Trump has said that he will appeal these, but will abide by court rulings. And that's essentially what he did in his first term. If you recall, he was sued a number of times, and a few of the cases ended up going up to the Supreme Court. For instance, the citizenship question, or whether the Census Bureau could include a citizenship question on its 2020 survey. It lost that. It abided by the decision. It lost the question of whether it could roll back Obama's DACA program, or at least the Supreme Court ruled that it didn't follow proper procedures, and therefore it would have to do so. And so then it went back about trying to roll it back again and comply with the Administrative Procedure Act. And so I would expect anything different during Trump's second term. I think they will probably lose some of these cases, especially the ones in which they're trying to overturn long-standing precedent. For instance, the firing of one of the NLRB members, which blatantly violates a 1935 the Humphreys executor precedent, and I'm not sure the U.S. Supreme Court is going to actually wade in and take that case. But they're courting a lot of challenges, probably with the expecting that, they're going to lose, but they're going to nevertheless try. They have some of the administration's lawyers take a very originalist view of the Constitution, so they're teeing up some cases for the Supreme Court. They are, in some cases, probably stretching executive power, but as to Kim's point, Joe Biden did that a number of times, and perhaps even more so with the student loan forgiveness, eviction moratorium. You could go down the line, vaccine mandates. And I'm not sure what Trump is doing is in any case, more egregious. A lot of these cases will ultimately have to be settled by the courts.
Thank you, Alicia and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.